And good morning. Today we're going to get into our study of the cell, and we're just going to do kind of an introduction here of what the cell is all about. So if you will simply follow along here, I will get you going, and then when you are finished, you do have a worksheet to complete in this module that will cover what I have talked about, and the answers to that can be found on pages 190 to 194 in your text. So the very first thing I would like to talk about is what is called the cell theory, and this had been developed over time by several different scientists working together or working apart and bringing their ideas together. But there are some primary parts that you first need to understand about cells and living things. The first thing you need to understand that if you are living, you are made up of cells. Whether you are a single-celled organism or a multi-celled organism, every living thing is made up of cells. These cells are the basic units of structure and function in all living things. These cells carry out very important metabolic process. They give us structure. They allow us to be shaped in the way that we are shaped, and they can carry out all the functions necessary to keep us alive. Third, new cells are produced from existing living cells. Okay? They do not freely animate themselves. They do not come from nothing. New cells have to come from existing living cells. In other words, cells are produced through reproduction. Okay, that can be either through the process of mitosis or meiosis. Okay, so those are the primary concepts behind the cell theory. As we continue, we can look at the work of these three guys, and these three gentlemen are the people that we can thank for helping us develop the cell theory. They are Matthias Schleiden, Theodor Schwann, and Rudolf Virchow. Schleiden worked with plants while Schwann worked at animals. They both, in their studies, came up with the idea that all plants and all animals are made up of cells. So again, all living things are made up of cells. Okay. And then we have Virchow, who showed that cells only come from existing cells that have divided or reproduced. So again, remember these three guys. They are the ones that helped develop the three parts of the modern day cell theory. Now, the first thing I'd like you to do at this point is discuss the difference between what are considered prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. Okay. The big difference between a prokaryotic and a eukaryotic is the presence of a nucleus. Okay. If we look at the terms prokaryotic, eukaryotic, that's basically what they are saying. Pro, in this case, means before. Kary is nucleus. So before the nucleus, and EU stands for true, so a true nucleus. So prokaryotes lack a nucleus. For the most part, they also lack specific organelles, and eukaryotes do have a nucleus that contains the genetic information. So again, prokaryotes, eukaryotes, do they have a nucleus or not? Okay. The purpose of the nucleus is to contain the genetic material. Eukaryotes contain all their genetic material, their DNA, inside this nucleus. Okay, you can see here in the picture of an animal cell, the nucleus located there in the center. Prokaryotes do not have their DNA enclosed. Their DNA looks much different than that of the eukaryotes. It's basically just found within the cytoplasm of these organisms, most prokaryotics being unicellular organisms. Okay, and it's in a loop. It's one big loop of DNA as opposed to individual strands. Okay, so there would be an example of a prokaryotic organism. If we were to compare the two, prokaryotics are generally much smaller and then simpler as eukaryotic cells. As I said, these usually are your unicellular organisms. They are lacking a nucleus. They are, in most cases, lacking the small organelle structures that carry out a lot of the life activities that you and I can carry out in our cells. So these are very, very simple organisms. However, since they are living creatures, they can grow, reproduce, respond, and some can even move by gliding along surface or swimming through liquids. In other words, they still carry out the 8 characteristics of life. The most common of the prokaryotes are the bacteria, and the bacteria can be divided into 2 kingdoms, but again, when you think prokaryote, think of the small, simple, single-celled organisms such as bacteria. Eukaryotes, on the other hand, are generally larger organisms because they are multicellular, and their cells are much more complex, and that is because they contain special structures called organelles, with each organelle having a very specific job that it does in the cell, and we'll talk about that later on in this unit. Okay. Not only do they have these organelles, or these structures that carry out very specific jobs, they have very specialized internal membranes that help protect each of these structures and help regulate what passes in or out. Okay, because of these different structures, eukaryotic cells become highly specialized. In other words, they carry out a certain function. Okay, for example, if we look at you, you have certain cells that became skin cells, certain cells that became brain cells, certain cells that become part of your heart, okay, part of your muscles. So our cells can do something called differentiation because of their specialization. When we talk about eukaryotes, we're talking about plants, animals, fungi, and protists. Okay, so pretty much anything that does not fall into the kingdoms of bacteria will fall into eukaryotic. Plants are multicellular, animals, fungi, and protists. Okay, there are some single-cell protists, but in most cases they are multicellular. Okay, that ends the presentation for today. Now again, I'd like you to pull up the worksheet. Okay, you can again do what we have been doing, and that is simply to do the worksheet as is and submit it, or you can download it and then fill it out, and then I will have a second Dropbox and assignments that you can go to and submit that way. Have a good day. Make sure you get your assignment completed and submitted.